Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to continue to have a look at the latest on the risk of much colder and potentially snowy conditions returning through February. Now, over the past few days, we have been looking at a lot of models that have suggested that as we progress through February, we could be turning more blocked, and that does, of course, bring the risk of some significant snow in places. And that significant risk could even arrive as early as the middle part of next working week. Now, initially, as we'll see from some of the shorter range runs, the risk will mostly be across Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, because we are expecting that rain-snow divide, the area between the cold air and the mild air, to be positioned further northwards. But as we head into next weekend, we could see that cold air drift further southwards as well. And of course, in the subsequent days, which is getting into sort of the very long range, there are even some charts showing a more significant block developing, which could prolong colder weather and perhaps could mean even more widespread wintry conditions. So we'll run through what the latest UKV is showing, looking at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It pretty much gets to the end of its run and just about starts to show that cold air arriving. Then we'll have a look at some of the longer range charts, which have been really all over the place over the past few days. We've seen some beast from the east type runs, and we've seen others that show stormy westerlies. So it is a little bit all over the place. We'll try to paint a pretty good picture of what the most likely scenario will be in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitch as well. The link's in the description. And if you start on the live radar, you can see we couldn't be further from colder weather at the moment. A pretty flat westerly flow, lots of drizzle around, especially across parts of the Midlands here. You can see lots of these areas of lighter rain, miserable, drab conditions. Heavier showers pushing into Scotland. You can see how far we are away from anything cold, considering really only the highest ground of Scotland is seeing anything wintry out of these showers, which does show you it is mild for the time of year. Because, of course, I've said this over the past few videos that we are pretty much in the coldest time of the year, traditionally for the UK. So mid to end of January through to mid-February. That is really where we see our coldest conditions generally, and you can see we are well above average at the moment. Now, temperatures this evening around 5:30. You see it is, of course, milder further southwards, closer to the higher pressure and the milder air masses sitting across much of the continent. You can see it is actually pretty mild across much of Europe at the moment. Scotland has said it's slightly colder over the higher ground, which is expected, but really it is much milder than it should be this time of year. The westerly winds are going to continue over the coming days, and we actually do have some weather warnings issued for rain. Again, it's mainly forcing relief rainfall. We see all of that moisture-laden air hit the hills and the mountains from the west, and then produce heavy rain over the hills. So it's from 6 p.m. tomorrow until 9 p.m. on Monday. So persistent and at times heavy rain, bringing some disruption. We're looking at, again, 40 to 75 millimetres of rain, maybe up to 120 and 170 millimetres in the wettest spots. And again, it is mainly over the higher ground. It is at the moment medium impact, very low likelihood. So it's one of those where it is likely to be updated as we head into tomorrow. But at this stage, I wouldn't expect anything too drastic from this unless you are in a sort of a flood-prone area across western Scotland. For most other areas, it is going to continue to be drab, rain around, but shouldn't be anything too heavy. Now, if you go over to the latest UKV, you can see lots of that drizzly rain heading in from the west through the rest of this evening and continuing into tomorrow, and that rain will become a little bit heavier further northwards, and that's why we have that warning issued. Really only heavy across parts of western Scotland. Elsewhere, still could be persistent, but most likely will be lighter in intensity. That rain continues to pile in over the rest of Sunday evening into Monday, but you can see more of it starts to turn to snow, which gives us the first indication that colder air is trying to push in. Now, I must stress the risk of anything widespread in terms of snow won't be arriving until at least Wednesday or Thursday, but just giving you a hint that colder air is trying to push in, with more of this precipitation falling to snow over the higher ground. Eventually, that weather front pushes all of that colder air back out into the ocean, and most places fall back as rain as that weather front does clear through. It does slowly start to drift southwards, so you see initially the weather front pushes northwards, clears Scotland, and then starts to push southwards again as the low pressure system goes north and then gets pushed south as that cold air starts to push back in. It's a very messy picture, I must emphasise that, over the coming days. As we head into Tuesday, Wednesday, we see a big massive rain clear for all, and it's going to be pretty horrible out there through Tuesday evening into Wednesday. But then look what happens as we head into Wednesday and Thursday. More wintriness across Scotland, and we see another low approach from the south, southwest, and it is pushing into some pretty cold air that is starting to get established further northwards. Now you can see the sort of situation we are most likely looking at next week. Northern England, northwards, risk of snow, maybe even significant snow. Further south than that is likely to see a lot of heavy rain, but nowhere near cold enough to see snow. But we are expecting by Friday, Saturday time to suddenly see that air mass flip and that cold air to push completely through as this very complicated low that kind of gets stuck for about 48 hours over the top of us does eventually clear to our east. Those upper air temperatures don't look ridiculously cold, but if you look at the dew points, you can see it is well below freezing, which means there is a high likelihood that when we're in that colder air and that precipitation pushes in, you will likely see something wintry in nature. And the 2 metre temperatures will reflect that as well. We can see over the coming days, generally average to above average. This afternoon, 13 or 14 degrees seem pretty ridiculous for the time of year. And overnight temperatures might not drop much below 9 or 10 across England and Wales. Into Sunday, another mild day, 10 to 13 degrees. But slowly into Monday, colder across Scotland. Initially, before that weather front pushes out away, before the cold air starts to sink back in through Tuesday, and pushes even further southwards across Wednesday. And you can see by Wednesday afternoon where the battle lines are drawn. Further southwards, 7 or 8 degrees. Chilly, but still generally around average or maybe even slightly above. Further northwards, we're more towards those mid to low single digits, if not below freezing, and it's well emphasised overnight in better where those lines are drawn. Pretty much northern England northwards, we are seeing very cold air get established, risk of snow, maybe even significant snow when that weather front moves in. Further southwards than that, we are likely to see mild air stay in place for at least another few days into next weekend, around the 10th, 11th of February. We will just look at the GFS precipitation charts in a minute, not for a literal forecast of what is going to be happening, as we are still too far away to say that with any detail, but just to illustrate that sort of dividing line a lot better, just showing you where we could see, you could see heavy snow 50 miles away from you, but it's 9 or 10 degrees where you are. So it is going to be a very messy picture next week, and we'll try to emphasise that in a little bit more detail, looking at the GFS now. So if you do look at the latest GFS, you can see the flat westerly we've got at the moment. We couldn't be further from colder weather. But that all flips as we head into this upcoming week. The high pressure to our south loses all its strength and low pressure replaces it. And it's as this low approaches, we see some colder air just about get in. And that's where we could see snow falling. Now the GFS actually has that milder air pushing it away quite far northward into Scotland there. So by Thursday, Friday, really, maybe only Scotland, if this GFS is right, could be seeing snow. But look what happens in the subsequent days. That cold air wraps around on the back edge of that low into the weekend and comes in for all there. We could see further lows developing within the flow. That could give some snow on the back edge through Saturday, Sunday, Monday, even for areas further southwards. Now, this is the first area of interest for wintriness. Of course, it's coming up soon, so we have focused on that. But there is the risk, day 10 and beyond, we could see something, as I said at the start of the video, something even more blocked and sustained. Now, by this point, in around 8-9 days' time, when cold air is established, but if we look at the pressure charts, there's not really any massive blocking. So you would expect low pressure to run in pretty quickly after this. But look what happens. Blocking actually starts to establish itself very quickly, and we keep a northeasterly or even easterly flow starting to develop. Now, I must stress that because the high pressure doesn't penetrate right into Greenland and it still stays attached to the Atlantic, it does mean that we stay under more of a higher pressure influence, which may result in a similar spell to what we saw in January for many areas further southwards, and perhaps even more widespread than that, where it is mainly just very cold with little in terms of snowfall. It is a risk that happens, but that is something to watch as well. This sort of scenario, it would be frigid indeed. If you look at the snow and ice, you can see there's not too much, even for Scotland. But if we do put on the 2-metre temperatures, you can see it is pretty freezing cold indeed, especially overnight, widely down to -3, -4. You see the daytimes nudging a bit up above freezing, but that is because we're getting to the second half of February here, which is when the sun strength really starts to ramp up and it becomes more and more difficult to see ice days. So that is why these temperatures in the day are nowhere near as exceptional as you'd assume with these sort of upper air temperatures. Now, if you look at the precipitation charts for this, just to give an indication, as I said, of where that rain snow line could develop, you can see lots of heavy snow here by Thursday for northern areas, especially across Scotland, maybe even northern England initially, but mainly Scotland. But look what happens as that cold air drifts southwards, moves into northern England there, Northern Ireland, and perhaps even into southern areas by Sunday into Monday and beyond. Now, the GFS isn't the best to illustrate this because it has pushed that milder air slightly further northwards. If we go back to the GM, for example, here and have a look at that, again, you can see snow further northwards, perhaps even across parts of northern England here by Wednesday, Thursday, as that colder air is slightly further southwards. So as I said, very messy picture. GFS had rain across northern England here by Thursday. GM has heavy, widespread snow. And eventually that cold air does win out, and we see snow potentially for all as we go into the back edge of that low as it moves into Europe and end up in easterly winds. This is a bit of a spoiler for the GM, which we'll now have a look at. Run through it quite quickly because we've just seen it there, but very similar low pressure pushing in by early next week. If we do put on the upper air temperatures here, pushing in cold air established across much of northern England and Scotland, with that milder air not pushing quite as far northwards as the GFS, and eventually cold air pushes back in. We all go pretty cold and tries to establish more of a succinct block here towards Scandinavia, though, trying to push in an easterly wind. Quite a lot of cold air is there, so that could go pretty chilly indeed. You can see, though, both GFS and GM go colder, if not go even colder, more blocked at day 10, but both do it in different ways. So that does not help the reliability of these models either, as yes, they do have a similar outcome in terms of temperatures and types of precipitation, but the way they do it is very different, so that is not particularly helpful, unfortunately. Now, if you look at the latest ECMWF, unfortunately, the 12 o'clock run is about to start to come out, but I've got to get this video out now, so we'll have to look at the midnight run. Again, huge model variability, and probably the best thing to do is really just look at the ensembles, which we'll do in a minute, but we'll run through this regardless. Again, you can see those northerly winds starting to arrive, low pressure bumping into that cold air, eventually pulling out into Europe, and then we see a bit of high pressure starting to build in. Again, similar to the GM there, trying to build up towards Scandinavia, but maybe not quite as much success at day 10. Again, you can see the cold air wrapping back in on the backside of that low, and when we stay in cold, dry air all the way to day 10. So if you do now have a look at the latest GFS ensembles, they've just come out at 12 o'clock, and you can see over the next week, we're average to above average. Interestingly, the main precipitation falls as we are in the milder air for London, and as soon as the precipitation dies down, the much colder air moves in. Now, it doesn't mean there won't be any snow, it just means that the main precipitation will be falling as rain for areas further southwards. That looks quite likely, very likely, I'd say, right now. Further northwards, though, could be different, as we'll have a look at Glasgow in a minute. Beyond that, it does stay cold, maybe even very cold, but a lot more scatter in around that day 10 period, which is expected, of course, at that time frame. As I said, doesn't mean there won't be any snow. You can see there is actually quite a bit of snow here around next Saturday, Sunday time. Again, most likely on the back edge of that precipitation band. Again, I wouldn't say this is likely to amount to much because of the timing of it, coming on the back of some very mild weather and a lot of rain. Could just be a lot of falling snow there, nothing too significant on the ground. But again, one to watch later this week. And you can see the 2-metre temperatures, very interestingly, they're dropping off a lot. 11, 12 degrees next Thursday, Friday, down towards 3 or 4 come next Saturday, Sunday. But if we look further northwards, you see a different picture. That heavier precipitation arrives similar time to the temperature dropping as well. Yes, there are some that do bring milder air in, and those are the ones that push that warmer air mass well to the north of Scotland, like the operational GFS, but the majority keep us cold, and that means that there is the risk for Scotland to see some significant snow next week. Even for Glasgow here, which is pretty low-lying, we're seeing some members producing 10 to 20 centimetres, about 4 or 5, which is a significant number at that 6 or 7 day time frame. 2 metre temperatures just emphasise how uncertain it is. Some still going quite mild, others though only around freezing, which indicates a lot of snow could fall, and the dew points very, very marginal. Most, I must say, are below freezing, but there are those that push it just above, like the GFS operational, which would suggest low-lying areas could see more of a mix or even rain. So we will just have to see, but at the moment, in the next week, it is looking likely to see significant snow in the north, especially Scotland, but could be northern England as well. And we could see some falling snow and some winteriness on the back edge as that pulls away. This is all in the next week to 10 days. Beyond that, then we could see the risk of something a bit more sustained and potentially a bit more widespread in terms of cold and snow, as we see a real block starting to develop potentially. That's at least what we're seeing. It's something longer range here. If we finish by looking at the ECMWF ensembles, again, only look at the midnight run, and it is very similar for Glasgow. Same little bump there in around 6 or 7 days' time, and stays fairly cold around that. If we look at London, you can see, again, very similar. Most precipitation falling while it is mild, but we do turn colder. And then we still see the risk of snow in places, and generally stays pretty cold beyond that. You can see, though, there are maybe 3, 4, 5 runs that go cold or even very cold, with one even getting towards the minus 15 degree at 850 HPA level. Now that is us getting towards sort of a beast from the east type air mass. That is a possibility if we did see Scandinavian high developing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see another couple, maybe operational GFS runs going for something like that in the next few days. But it is one to watch. Definitely middle to second half of February has got real interest, and anything we see next week could just be the start of a few weeks of cold and potentially wintry conditions if we go by what the latest models are showing. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. Do stay safe out there for the next few weeks. Could be turning quite wintry indeed, but I'll keep you updated as we aren't looking like anything cold for at least the next 3 or 4 days. Still got a good few more days to firm things up. And as I said, I'll keep you updated with all the latest developments.